Welcome to Comic Book Day. I'm Joe, and this is episode number 6. And as always, I'm going to show off all the comics that I bought this week, and I've got a couple comics that I'm going to show you the art from. First off, this is Infidel number 3. This has been a really great comic so far. It's a horror comic. It's set in a building where they had a big bombing happen. Aisha is the main character of this comic, and she moved into this building. Her mother-in-law lives in this building, and they move in there after a bombing has happened that's being blamed on terrorists. A terrorist. This issue, I think, is setting up that maybe this guy wasn't actually a terrorist, but he also saw these ghosts that lived in the building. That's kind of what I think is going on, at least. But either ways, he accidentally possibly even blew up the building. He had all these bombs set up, but he wasn't planning on blowing them up right then. They just kind of blew up. And so now there's these ghosts all throughout the building that every time Aisha sees them, they kind of are like saying racist stuff to her and very like misogynistic stuff. And so last issue, she's accidentally pushed down her mother-in-law and her stepdaughter, basically. Accidentally pushed them down the stairs. And another tenant at the apartment saw her push, or thinks she saw her push the mother-in-law and the daughter down the stairs. So she told the police that, it was like a purposeful thing. Aisha is in a coma now. So her friend Medina is going to talk to... She goes to talk to the other tenant who, told the police what she saw. And while she's there, kind of getting into an argument with this woman, she all of a sudden sees one of these big giant ghosts and, freaks out. But the tenant doesn't see it at all. Also, in this comic, we're following Ethan, who is just recently met Aisha. But the last issue, he kind of saw like a ghost face very briefly. And in this issue, he sees a couple more. He's trying to investigate whether or not this guy who was like obsessed with opening portals to like another dimension, or like to the afterworld. He's trying to investigate if this guy lived in their building or not, and he finds, evidence that this guy probably did live in their building right near the end of the comic. This is a really great horror series, though. And it's just been optioned for a movie, which I think will be awesome to see, because it's got really great visuals with the ghosts. The artwork in Infidel is great, but this issue begins with a little bit different artwork, as it's kind of telling this flashback of Aisha and Medina when they were, I think probably when they were like teenage girls, maybe when they were like 12, even, preteens. But it kind of just shows how close they are to one another. And, it kind of helps explain why Medina is trying to, she's so dedicated to prove that her friend is innocent. And she's also been very worried that, her friend is, like, going insane or something, too. But these ghosts that are in this comic are really the best part of it. Here you see, this is what Ethan, Aisha's friend, this is what he sees at his friend's apartment. This is a reflection of a mirror as these ghosts are coming out. And then it does great sequences kind of like this where, they space out things really kind of interesting. This is showing the bombing that happened in the apartment. And then this was a really, really great page that kind of, it's all built around, here we have the guy who bombed the apartment. He's been shot by the police, obviously. And these 3 friends here, Ethan, Grace, and I just brought this guy in, I don't remember. They're all talking about kind of this situation that happened, with this bombing. And then, what followed up with the police finding the guy. Here, we've got a great shot. You get great shots of, just creepy red, some kind of being watching people. And here it is again where they're watching, but then here's this big massive ghost. It's basically the size of the entire wall. At the same time that this ghost wakes up, Aisha's the one waking up from a coma here at the same time that this ghost shows up. It's always really exciting to see these ghosts come in because they're so freaky. They're so twisted and warped. It's great. It'll make for a great, great movie. And the comic is always good because it has this. It'll have just a couple little panels that kind of focus in on a really creepy moment. This is Captain America number 702. This is continuing that story in the future following Jack Rogers as he's now being hunted by the government, and he goes into this kind of secret place for all the historians, and he finds this guy who shows him that Captain America might actually be alive, hidden underneath in old Washington, D.C. And so he goes. It's got flashbacks, again, showing this battle between Captain America and the Red Skull. And so he goes and digs his way under the ground after, the government busts into this historian place, kills this guy who's trying to help him and who showed him, this vision of Captain America getting stuck. He thinks he's going to be stuck in the Cosmic Cube, but the very end of it reveals that it's the Red Skull is captured in the Cosmic Cube. Maybe Captain America will pop up somewhere, but I think it's probably mostly going to be on Jack to, save the day. He does have Captain America's shield now, so that's kind of exciting. And so far, I like this story. It's a weird little future story, but, that's what always made comics great, is these really weird storylines. Usually set in the future or alternate dimensions, This is Gideon Falls number 3. So far, this is another great horror series. Although this one isn't quite as scary as Infidel is, but it's kind of building up more suspense. This issue reveals that Dr. Shu, she goes to Norton to tell him that she saw the Black Barn at the end of the last issue, but she still doesn't want to accept that it's real, so, ultimately she tells Norton she's going to institutionalize him. He has set up all these booby traps after he was robbed in the last issue, and so he's kind of excited because she can maybe they can start working together. He knows that eventually she's gonna have to come around because she won't be able to deny that the Black Barn is real. And then at the same time we follow Father Fred, who is trying to write his first sermon for his new congregation, but he has nothing to write after Father Tom, the previous priest, turned out to have murdered a woman after they thought he was dead already. But at the end of this, he goes to meet Doc Sutton, who is apparently another guy who is obsessed with the Black Barn. And so now he's being brought into all this. There's a whole bunch of articles that Doc Sutton has that's about missing people in their town and different people seeing the Black Barn. It seems like maybe it takes in children. And they kind of showed one child in one picture who I thought looked a lot like our main character, Norton. So I wonder if they'll reveal that he, was entered the Black Barn as a child, or, maybe he was someone who escaped and is the only person. But that's really all speculation. This is Dry County number 3. In this issue, our main character, Lou, decides to write a comic strip in the newspaper that it'll be like an open-ended comic where people can send in, the answer or the punchline to the comic. And Lou is hoping that Janet will see this and write him some sort of clue as to where she's been kidnapped to. He also talks to a friend of his who's keeping watch on Earl, Janet's ex-boyfriend, who sees him going and meeting with these 4 young girls, like teenage 18-year-old girls. He meets up with them at a hotel room, and Lou realizes that this is the same group of girls that him and his friend saw in Miami on a different night. At the end of this issue, Lou finally does receive a clue after all these people send in different weird, lame suggestions mostly. But then he's sent after Earl again. I'm really enjoying this comic so far. Not a lot happened in this issue, but, it's not very far in, so they still have to kind of build up the mystery more. This is Barrier number 3. I don't remember if I said last week, but I think I might have. This is a weekly series, so I'm really excited to see this. I thought that I read in this afterword by Brian K. Vaughan that they weren't going to reprint this at all. And then I picked this up at the comic book store, and the guy tells me that they are going to make a hard-covered version that collects all these at least. This issue was really great, though. It's an entirely silent issue, which was really a bit of a relief. You know, being half in Spanish, you have to go through and translate half of it. I have to, at least. Not everyone does. They're lucky. But this one's completely silent, and it was really a interesting way to do it. I think that they've set up that probably these big aliens are making our main characters deaf just by hearing their voices. Last issue, at the end, Liddy saw these two giant aliens that kind of spoke. They had these colored, just a solid colored word bubble. And then her ear started to bleed. And then Oscar sees one and it speaks to him in this issue, and his ear starts to bleed. So now possibly both our characters are deaf. Maybe that's going to carry on for the next 2 issues. This issue also maybe kind of reveals some stuff about Liddy's husband, who was kind of spoken of in the first issue. This one begins with her having a dream, seeing him out just walking along on a horse while there's this big tornado starting to build. And then she realizes that the horse is the horse that got killed by the aliens in the first issue. And her husband also has a big hole in his head, like he's been shot. I don't know if it's going to reveal she shot him, why he got shot. But also in this, Liddy and Oscar, they think by the end that maybe they've uncovered that like fire scares the aliens or hurts the aliens. But all it does is cause the aliens to flood the room that they're both in now. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in this comic. I don't know if it's going to have any talking anymore. I assume it will, but it's great, and it's weird, and I really think people should be checking it out. This week's Barrier began with Liddy having a nightmare about her dead husband, and here we see this, and in the back of the comic, they actually have a little bit of a sketch and kind of a preview of how they wrote this beginning part, and it was really left up to the artist for the most part, but they described the whole process here in the back, so it's really kind of cool to read that. Then here we see where Liddy kind of discovers how the aliens are just, I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on with the aliens, but they really are bothered by flame. And so they kind of, just shake very, very violently. Oscar gets his backpack back and shows Liddy that in his notebook he's got this little kind of comic book that he's drawn. And unfortunately he's got to burn most of the notebook, though, to try to really bug these aliens. Where you get some really great shots of these aliens and just kind of... It's hard to tell what's going on in some of these. You can't tell if you're seeing outside the ship. Here's outside the ship, I'm pretty sure, up top. And then here's them. But at this point, I can't tell where, like, the whole ship starts shaking when the fire is burning. So I don't know if it's, like, some kind of organic ship. And the aliens, the aliens look kind of rock-like. The ship looks kind of rock-like. So I can't tell what's going on with them definitely. But I also really like how this liquid that they put Oscar and Liddy in, it does kind of, it has this weird effect with the liquid, with them being in it. And what's funny is since this was a silent issue, they just have the ... at the end instead of being able to put any quote at all. This is Kick-Ass number 4. This issue is all about Kick-Ass having to break out from last issue, being caught by all the criminals and already getting beat up a bunch. This time she gets even more beat up, but luckily one of the thugs had filled a bunch of party balloons with hydrogen, so she takes a lighter from a guy, blows up the whole place. They're in a hardware store, so there's a bunch of kerosene they show. She goes through and lists all this explosive stuff that's in there. So there's a huge, huge explosion. Then our main weird bad guy, I can't remember what his name was. They don't use people's names a lot in this, really. Hitman guy, I guess, who had been brought in. He's still chasing her after they blow it up, and he's jumping on the car, trying to shoot her. Glass is bulletproof. He climbs on top of the car, slams into a big auto dealership, and he goes flying into another car. Also, they're going to call in another hitman to take out Kick-Ass. I don't know. I thought I saw somewhere in like the back of one of these Kick-Ass issues that there's only going to be 6 issues, at least for this first story arc. And I feel like not much is going to be accomplished by the end of this. I read the first series with the original Kick-Ass, and I felt like all of those, independent stories, Kick-Ass 1, 2, and 3, they were only about 6 or maybe 7 or 8 issues long, and they seemed to tell more of a story than this, but maybe this is going to be an ongoing story. I had just assumed it would be a shorter, one story arc kind of story, and then maybe there'd be a sequel to it like they had done the other Kick-Ass. Hopefully this one will have a good ending if the ending is just 2 issues from now. This is Daredevil number 602. This follows Matt Murdock being the new mayor of New York, and he brings in Foggy Nelson to be his chief of staff, and that's always great to see Foggy and Matt together again. Ever since everyone in the world lost their memory of Matt Murdock being Daredevil, but he still revealed himself again to Foggy, so they've been on the outs ever since that. And this issue also sees Blindside and Daredevil go off to try to save the police department, but once they get there, they have to, fight through some of the hand ninjas that are trying to take over the city, and they get inside and find a giant pit. Very reminiscent of the giant pit that was in the Defenders series on Netflix. I don't know why they would have built anything underneath the police station, but the whole police station is wiped out. I don't know where this is going to go, but I always loved Daredevil. I want to see more of the Mayor Matt Murdock storyline, so I'm hoping they keep that around for a while. This is Avengers number 2. This was mostly following the Avengers, still kind of split up. Captain Marvel does team up with Captain America and Thor and Iron Man in this one, but they're fighting these giant kind of bugs and the Celestials that are popping up all over the place. Then She-Hulk gets attacked by giant bugs that come out of the Celestial, the one that died and fell down to New York. So while she's fighting those bugs, all of a sudden the Celestial kind of reveals that it's still slightly alive, and it teleports her away where she runs into Ghost Rider. So now those two get into a fight. And then really the big reveal of this issue was that Loki is somehow involved with this, and he's somehow hooked up with these dark Celestials called the Final Host. So I don't know how he's going to be involved or what he's up to. Mostly right now I'm excited about these Celestials, though, and I want to see how they deal with these giant beings. And they seem to be housing thousands of, bugs? I don't know if it's all going to be those weird bugs that are popping out and attacking people, or if there's going to be other things that the Avengers are going to have to fight too that come out of these Celestials. Alright, so that's the episode. Thanks everyone for watching, and please go through, leave a like, tell me what you're reading, leave comments, tell me if you're reading Infidel. I think it's really great. It's one of the best horror comics that I've read lately, and so yeah, definitely tell me about that. Tell me if you have any other horror comic suggestions, because I love horror comics. And come back next week. Thanks.